Hello, everyone, and happy 2025. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and welcome to not only the first episode of 2025, but the first historians interview here on the channel. Now, my guest today, an historian, adjunct professor, political scientist, strategist, journalist, former podcaster, sports fan, father, and husband, an all around amazing individual. If you've been following him on LinkedIn, you know who he is. He's an incredible individual, and I have been trying to get this person on my show for a very long time, and now he's finally here with us. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, Mr. Keith Pakela. Keith, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
I really appreciate it. That is really talking up the intro. I'll definitely say father and husband first, and hopefully everything else sort of fits in that mold. But thank you very much, and it's awesome to be here. We've been talking for years now, so I'm very excited to finally get to talk to you.
Awesome. So, Keith, before we dive into your background as an historian, as well as a professor and everything else, is there anything else you would like to add about your background?
Very brief about me. Very fortunate. I got to go to Rutgers University in New Jersey for my undergrad. Worked a little bit in political science out in Montana. Very lucky that I then got into grad school back home in New Jersey at Monmouth University and got my master's in American history, and now just adjuncting, considering going for a PhD, but very up in the air with that, depending, looking where we are right now. So.
Of course, absolutely. So, I guess, Keith, let's just start at the beginning then. So, in your bio, you've had done like a lot. You are all these things: former podcaster, sports fan, historian, adjunct professor, father, and husband. So, let's just start, as I said in the beginning, like this interest in history. Where did that come about? Was it always with you, or did family and friends or a certain individual instill that passion for history?
Uh, Great question. I'll be honest with you. I never thought I was going to be a teacher, historian, anything of the sort. I thought I was going to play guitar and travel the world. You quickly find out that doesn't happen. People go their separate ways. So for a while, I actually graduated high school and just went and worked. I got back to school sort of very late, 24, 25 years old, before getting my BA and then my MA. Speaking to a specific person, I got very lucky in ninth grade. I'll never forget. His name was Mr. Gregory Anderson. He had this
Okay.
phenomenal history class. He was sarcastic. He was funny. And it like blew me away as a ninth grader. And when I finally made it to college, I've not spoken to him in 10, 12 years now, but Adam Beldy, if he is out there, Professor Adam Beldy, one of the best guys I've ever met in my life. Sort of the same path as myself. He played music. He never thought he saw this path, but he had this interest in baseball, football, the history of sports. And from there, I saw like, you don't just have to have a history or an interest in names and dates per se. You can open up so far. And just those two, Mr. Anderson and Mr. Beldy, sort of just branched me out. It was the two of the greatest moments of my life. Yeah.
That's incredible. And it actually kind of parallels with my own journey with history because, yeah, I would 100% agree with you. Like, I myself was not, you know, going down the path of history. I wanted to be a graphics illustrator and designer. I actually wanted to go to Laguna College of Art and Design. But, of course, I didn't pan out well. And, just like you, I also had an amazing history teacher in high school. Her name was, at the time, Miss Check, now known as Miss Singleton. Amazing woman, amazing teacher. She really instilled that passion for history in me. And also, like yourself, going into college, having that amazing professor. For me, that was Professor Dennis Campbell. And you would have loved him, Keith. He was sarcastic. He told it like it was, especially for Roman history. That was a class I had him, as well as late antiquities. He did not sugarcoat anything. He sometimes cursed on Zoom calls, but he just made history so much fun. And that
Yeah.
actually then leads into the next question. So once you graduated from college, Keith, what was the aha moment for you that you wanted to continue down this path in history and just go with whatever, not so much as floats, but what works for you as an individual in the field of history?
Certainly, there are two sort of vying moments, and I would say one's historical and one wasn't. The one
Mm,
that wasn't was before I actually made it back into the sort of college rigmarole, the college life.
right.
I was working a sort of manual labor job. I
Mm,
wrote down here ShopRite in New Jersey, and I remember just feeling broken down every morning and saying, you know what, like I've been given this awesome opportunity, the ability to go to college, to go to Rutgers. I don't want to squander that without at least trying. I'm doing this labor, and I thought I really want to get into history. I enjoyed it. What's going to be that over the top aha moment? It finally came, and I wrote again. I wrote down when I was in grad school. I got to be a TA at Monmouth,
mhm.
and so sitting with the students and being able to go over study guides and
Right.
talk just about, hey, maybe you're not feeling this lesson. What worked for you and what didn't? And that moment, like from 2016 on, I was like, this is just something I get to talk history. I get to talk with other people that love the profession. Like,
Mhm.
what is not enjoyable about that? And I think that really just set me off.
That's amazing. And, that's actually going to lead into a lot of other discussions down the road in terms of, like, the field of history itself and its future, which we will touch on later. So
Mhm.
now let's jump ahead to a little bit later in your life when you are now like an adjunct professor. So when you decide to go down that path, what was sort of your goals you had in mind for yourself, but also a promise to your students? And I always like asking this question because I'm really intrigued what everyone's response is, because I'm sure you definitely agree, Keith, that for us growing up and being taught history, we were taught names, dates, and place,
Yeah.
and that can easily kill someone's passion for history. So I'm curious, for you, what
Yeah.
was your motivation, or not motivation, but your goal when you decided to make that commitment to be an adjunct professor?
Great question. The goal for me, for myself, was to prove that I could do it, number one, but
Hmm.
also to make it fun and interesting. And those professors I had in grad school made it fun and interesting. It wasn't just put your head down and take notes. It wasn't just a
Right.
lecture. So being able to say, let's open it up for discussion. What do you guys see in the news today that sort of correlates to what we're doing in this
Mm.
season? And so that for my class was able to show, like, also, from my standpoint of, I can make this fun and interesting. They could say, well, it's my everyday life. I'm living this. I don't just have to look at 1542 or 1492.
Right.
Like, it's every day. And so we could get into current events. We could talk about things. And, it was just to show them that you might not like history, so to speak, but if you have an interest in math and science, we could find the history of math. We could find the history of science. We can touch on sort of any branch you want to. And if you find your niche, you can run with that. So that was sort of,
Absolutely,
yeah.
100%. And just for our viewers and listeners, what are sort of like the histories that you teach? Is there like a specific discipline that you teach your students?
Predominantly, if we're speaking to, like, course wise, it's usually US 1, US 2, but I've branched into, I will be teaching world history for the first time this semester. I've done 20th century history.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I'm very excited. And just the ability to sort of talk, antebellum through
Right.
Reconstruction, and just give them this idea of what we were versus where we are now. Have we changed? How much? Have we not? It just opens up their minds at 18, 19, 20 years old. And I love seeing that light bell go off, or that light bulb.
Absolutely. That I 100% agree with you, Keith. There is nothing more amazing than seeing that spark, that intrigue
Yeah.
pop up. So now let's look on the other side for the family side. So what was your family's reaction when you told them that I'm going to be an adjunct professor? What was their reaction like?
My family was very proud. I'm very lucky. I got to, use the knowledge that they've instilled in me, sitting down and reading every day, handwriting every day, go to the library, try to find, something that interests you. And then that built into going to college, reading manuscripts, trying to
Mm,
transcribe things. So like that love for the library and reading went very well with college. So when I said, hey, I'm going to teach something I enjoy, it was that whole cliche, like you'll never work a day. You get to show up, you get to, talk history, you'll meet other professors, students, people that are 50, people that are 18, you'll get all the different ideas. So they were very, very excited. I'm thankful for everything they've done for me.
nice. And as an add-on to that, what was your reaction like from your students, in the sense, your students' comments when you began teaching? Were they positive? Were they mixed? And in a way, how have their responses from when you first started to now
Yeah.
validated your decision to go into this position?
Yeah, excellent. So in the beginning, I think like any job, there was a lot of maybe uncertainty. I go
Mhm.
in knowing the information, but how do I get it across? Am I stuttering, stammering? Am I flushed? Am I sweating?
Right.
So yeah, I think there was this sort of, he knows what he's talking about, but is he getting it across to us in the right way?
Mhm.
So some feedback I would get at the beginning was, he's great, but maybe he can present it a little differently.
Mhm.
And I had come from classes at Rutgers where they were sort of lecture. I'm just writing notes the whole time. So
Right.
learning differentiation, learning that, we could listen to an audio clip, we could pull up a map, we could look at a political cartoon. All these different ideologies really broke out when I'm adjuncting. I could say, all right, we're 18, 19, 20 years old. I could bring all these sort of things that you can't bring into a classroom from middle school. Maybe they're not old enough to talk about a certain topic. We could really open those up now. And the sort of dialogue and the feedback has gone from, he's uncertain but knows the information, to he's asking us questions of maybe opinion. It's not just names and dates. It's how do we feel about this? It's getting us
Right.
to open up. And I do think so much of history is like, how do we feel about that? How, we have the names, the dates, the facts, but does that mean it was good or bad? Like, let's break down both sides of the barrier. So it's fortunately gotten better. And I think for the ability to bring technology and other things into the classroom.
Absolutely. And you actually touched on something which we are going to expand on later. And that is, of course, understanding, in terms like audience, and in terms of students,
Yeah.
understanding that they are, you know, able to make conclusions on their own. If you just give them like the context to it, you
Yeah.
can really see. And I 100% agree. Like in college, we are taught, of course, the lecture halls, writing down notes. But for me, what I've always enjoyed were the seminar courses, where we have almost like this round table and we're able to provide our own opinions and thoughts. And it seems to me that that's where you're almost trying to
Yeah.
instill in your students, like, it's not so much a lecture as it is so much a seminar. Yes, you are teaching your students, but you're allowing them to voice their own thoughts and opinions on topics. And this kind of leads now into a reflective question, which I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on, Keith. So I'll lay some context for this one. So, as historians, we always want to show people what we can do. We want to
Mhm.
have that opportunity to showcase our work. But especially now in the digital age, it's a double-sided sword. Yes,
Yeah.
it does allow us the opportunity to showcase our work, whether it's a research paper, whether it's a dissertation, whether it's a video of us at a conference.
Yeah.
But in that regard, we do open ourselves up to, of course, the negative side of the internet and social media. And especially now in history, that's also very detrimental, which again, we will touch on later. And,
Mhm.
all of this, from, social media, the internet, and everything for the field of history, it can make us very anxious and nerve wracking. Like whenever we post like our thoughts on a historical topic or a topic that has historical ties to it,
Yeah.
and that imposter syndrome is coming back in the sense when we're like presenting and we don't know if we are who we say we are. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering for you, Keith, if you ever had those moments of imposter syndrome
Yes.
or self-doubt, and if so, what has disciplined you to continue going forward?
Yeah, sorry, I'm writing it down really quick. I think self-doubt creeps in a lot, and I think it should. And what I mean by that is, like, I come from a background of two parents that didn't go to college. I was very lucky, very blessed. They put money, time, energy, and effort aside for me. So self-doubt will click in. I'll say, what am I doing here? Like, what has happened in my life that's got me here? And then to
Right.
sort of snap myself out of it, I'll say, well, I put in the work. I put in the time, I put in the work. And, you know, it was the best I could do at that time at 26, 27 years old. So if I can take what I learned, formulate new thoughts, have new discussions, I could always go back and add on to that. And so I think that sense of becoming an imposter sort of always keeps us on our tails a little bit, or on our hind legs a little bit, because if we get too comfortable, especially in this field, by tomorrow something could pass by us. And so we always have to be looking out. Yourself, we're looking out for new things. What's the new sort of topic of the day? The new, especially as an adjunct or a teacher, what's the new technology that's out there? We have to stay in tune with the 18, 19, 20-year-olds that I mentioned so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something, if we're an imposter, we're going to lose everything by the wayside. So we just have to stay on top of the game, and that's what gets us sort of up and out.
Definitely, 100%. And there is a lot of truth, especially for like the historian community, where with the historians that I've had the opportunity to interview and connect and make friendships with, I'm always intrigued by this question because there is sort of like this evidence of like, self-doubt. And if we are taken seriously, especially if you don't go the route of the academic side of
Right.
being an historian. Because as a little introduction to the next set of questions, as I talked with another guest last year, in the field of history, for people who are just leaving college or going into college and wondering what they want to do, we are taught that for historians, there's only two pathways.
Yeah.
Either you're on the federal level or you're in the academic level.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll have individuals that are neither. But it's also in that moment where not just a self-doubt of being a historian, but it's also a self-doubt of, did I choose the right profession?
Yeah.
That really takes a toll. And that, of course, comes with a lot of, really understanding yourself, doing a lot of internal reflection, and also understanding what are your goals down the road. And goals are going to be something we will touch on in these next set of questions. So before we get into that, I did want to touch on something back in your bio, which is, of course, being a former podcaster. Now, I am intrigued by this, Keith. Can you tell us what that podcast entailed, and how did sort of you get involved in the podcasting community?
Yeah, great question. So again, it was one of those self-doubt moments where you think things are passing you by. And so I could say full well that the podcast I did was more sports based, and
Mm,
it was sort of thinking you could be the next big thing, but then come to find out, clearly, so only so many people really hit the big time with it. But there's so much that's always going on. It's getting the people, it's having the topics played out, it's, are you and your friend sort of disagreeing on one topic that might not play out so good that listeners want to hear? Is this something
right.
they'll even care about or tune in? So the idea of how can I involve history pops up every once in a while too. While one podcast obviously doesn't work out in terms of history, it might open a door. You might have checked in with someone or talked to somebody that says, hey, if you ever want to get back around, let's talk about something else. Let's sort of see where we can mesh something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's in the vein of people like Dan Snow, Dan Jones, who sort of mainstreamed that sort of podcast ideology where I think it gives a chance for people like us to really open it up and galvanize it to a point where it could become something.
Absolutely, 100%. And the podcasting, well, for history has really blown up as well. Like I've had a guest last year, Patrick Little, who is an Australian historian who specializes in the same discipline as me, classical history. And having him on the show was just so fascinating, and just learning the process, formatting the episodes, getting your timeline ready. What are you going to be talking about? I mean, that is work in and of itself, but it's so amazing to see the different avenues you can use history. As you were just talking, Keith, that it's not just, history on the academic level or history on the federal level. History can go into many other avenues if you know how to understand that process. And that leads into the next set of questions, which is what I like to call the business side of being an historian. So I'm curious, Keith, for you, did that discussion ever come up in your life, the business side of being an historian as opposed to the academic side of being an historian?
The business side certainly comes up when you are at, say, the university or you are at the school and you talk about, pardon me, and you might mention things like, what can we do to sort of monetize these incredible talks we have? There's always as you mentioned, there's always the academic side of just getting it out there so more people hear it.
Right.
But because there is a federal or sort of an education route, most of those positions, when people fill them, they're taken until that person unfortunately passes on.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, you get professors that are there for 30, 40, 50 years, authors who sort of find their niche and run with it. And so you're like, where can we put our foot in this business, so to speak? And even if it doesn't last long, how can we make our mark on the field? And so it'll come up with friends and family especially. How are you going to make money out of being a historian? How are you going to, monetize this in a way where you could pay bills? So you have to be able to admit, like, I might not be able to pay a bill with this. This is something I do out of the fun of it, out of the joy in my heart. And, we get lucky, we get lucky. If not, you could say you have a few episodes up.
That is very, very true. And that's, on the other side for me, being an author, that's always been something that I've always, struggled with and always tried to understand, how can I make a living off of being not just an historian, but an author. And the truth of the matter is, just like an author, for a historian, it's not a position where it's a get rich quick scheme. It is a discipline. It is a field that you really have to hone your craft. You really have to sometimes take leaps of faith, whether it's joining a dig team for an archaeologist guild in Europe, or being part of a dissertation team or an oral history team that is documenting history from all over the world. It's taking leaps of faith and really understanding, okay, there's going to be a lot of steps to this, but if I'm committed, will this give me what I'm looking for? And even in that sentence, give me what I'm looking for also has to be really, really understood. And we will touch on that a little bit later. So going back to your role as an adjunct professor, how do you, as not only the teacher, but also as the historian, really understand your students? Because, just like as authors, we have our own audience. For teachers, they have their classroom, which have a wide background of students with different interests who may or may not be interested in the subject of history, but our goal as historians is to at least try to spark the interest. So how have you been able to really understand your audience, so to speak, your students specifically?
Yeah, excellent question, because I sort of want to harken back to something you just said that I wrote down. I'll go through the beginning of my class each semester and say, like, be honest with me, who enjoys history? I might get 3 hands up. I might get 4 or 5 if I'm lucky. because they're all finance majors, or they're all going for business, or think they have the
Right.
idea, which they very well may. I'm not here to say that. But I will say one thing I want to do is at least sort of show you a path, or open up a new idea for you. And it's making sure each student feels independent, they feel heard, they feel safe, and like they have the ability to talk freely in my class. There very well may be times when they only have one sort of discourse at home. So if you were coming into my classroom with, 17 other students with a different background, I want you to be able to raise your hand and say, well, this is what I've heard, this is what I think, this is what I know. And so I've had some very amazing discussions. I've been very lucky where we have two very different sides, but we could have a real conversation about it. And I will get an email at the end of the semester saying, thank you for opening this up for me. I never thought about something that way. I can now apply that down the road. So it might not be that they follow history. It might not be that they want to go into the field, but they might find a new book, an author, a new website, something that just sort of resonates with them. And if we could find that, that's sort of what I hope I can do as a historian. That's how I would sort of leverage that.
And that's, very well spoken, Keith. I really do appreciate that answer. And you are, absolutely right to engage that spark and to have it be almost like a safe space to talk about history, because, now more than ever, history has become a battleground in terms of the presentation of history. And I don't want to go into many specifics or details on this tangent, but just to bring it up, especially now more than ever, the field of history, definitely needs to be taught correctly and accurately. And that brings, of course, another discussion, which, of course, is now more than ever, going back to what we talked about, which is like social media, which is content creation as historians, whether that's being part of academic journals, magazine articles, anything to not only bring awareness to a topic they're really passionate about, but also develop a new skill. So, Keith, have you ever gone down that pathway now and again in terms of content creation?
It's sort of a tough question, because I look at my age at 37, 38 years old, and I have a lot of my students, they'll talk about 18, 19 years old, TikTok, what they saw on TikTok. And, I certainly think if you can get someone who could do it right, it could be a saving grace, because so many people are on TikTok. So if you have a history page, or you're an author, get your name out there. As long as we have the right names and dates and facts, whatever it is, we don't want any of that misinformation. When I speak to myself, I'll certainly purchase magazines, a history magazine. I'll subscribe to journals, Southern Historical Society, things like that. And every once in a while, if I see something pop up, I'll try to reach out, throw in my 2 cents. But I think there's so much out there that it's like this maelstrom right now.
Yes.
Where do we even start? Where do we begin to look for history that's fun, that we can trust, and that, isn't going to start a problem that's going to make things worse off? So it's this sort of odd era that we're in.
Yeah, and that actually leads into another important discussion, which I have brought up with a lot of other historians in the past, and that is, of course, have you heard of the term armchair historians?
I know more of a sports term, Monday morning quarterback, but yeah, I've heard the phrase, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I'm bringing that up is that I've talked with a lot of guests last year and years before on this term, and it didn't really hit me until, the discussion surrounding it. And going back to this topic of, the presentation of history, content creation regarding history, and so forth.
Yeah.
There are a lot of incredible content creators on YouTube and TikTok who make amazing content. One I can name off the top of my head is Professor Meredith Walker. She's an amazing professor, as well as TikTok content creator. But you also have the other side of the coin, where you have, individuals who may not have a academic background in history, but they are passionate about it. Now, before I go any further, there's a little disclaimer.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that all armchair historians fall under these next few things I'm going to bring up, but there is a distinction between people who have done research on history and are presenting content and those who are just pulling information, different pieces from different articles that may not connect, but crafting it into a story. And for me as an historian, that is the biggest irk. And going back to what you said about Keith, about misinformation, I'm actually curious. Have you ever had a discussion with a student on a topic where it wasn't so much of like a strong discourse, but it brought up a discussion of, getting our history from social media
Yeah.
and not doing the due diligence of further research?
Yeah, I can think of. I think the one that comes to mind the most is a student who had a very sort of one leaning upbringing and a sort of argument about states' rights and how 1861 through 1865 played out. And you could, of course, have that thought, but it seemed like there was not a willingness to fall into or even listen to another side of the story. So it's one of those where I'm sort of shook to the point of, where did you hear this? Where did you find anything out about this? And it was a sort of YouTuber. And just hearing that sort of sparked this curiosity of, sorry, I wrote down here that you meant the content, doing the research and actually putting in the work, or the irk and pulling stories together. That's sort of what it felt like to me. It sort of felt like this YouTuber probably pulled a bunch of stories, took certain authors, maybe based in the, 1870s, early 1900s, and then sort of put that out there. And it just sort of astounded me that we were still having these conversations. But that's one that sticks out. I mean, you certainly get names or certain ways people died that are sort of left up to, interpretation.
Right.
That seemed to come across one way. But that one sort of stood out to me. Yeah.
Yeah, that is, very, very powerful. And again, the reason why I bring this up, viewers and listeners, is that now more than ever, the discipline of history is, it definitely needs help, because you definitely have, these instances, on a more grounded level. But on the flip side, you also have what I like to call the gatekeepers of history when it comes to like scholarship as well as disciplines.
Yes.
And Keith, I was wondering if you could provide your own opinion on this discussion of gatekeepers in the historical community and the historians field, and why it's important to bring this topic to light.
Definitely. So if I'm interpreting gatekeepers, sort of, those at the head of the class that are not willing to sort of hear any other ideologies, I've noticed it mostly sort of in historical societies on a local level. That's been my own personal experience. There's a fantastic person with a brilliant history, obviously, in the town. You might bring up some information that's not so, enlightening about them. And there's sort of this sort of push to keep that down a little bit. Let's not expose. So that's sort of what I'm noticing locally. When I'm thinking big picture history, I'm sure there are some authors that we see more and more. I won't name any, obviously. I don't want to say anything or
of course.
But yeah, I think there's sort of, as with anything, within the next 10, 20 years, we're going to start seeing new historians branch up, because maybe these other historians are falling by the wayside. So hopefully that sort of gatekeeper idea opens up sort of a wall for us to push through as historians and say, let's sort of leave that in the past, I hope. And hopefully the new generation of historians is sort of more enlightening isn't the right word, sort of more welcoming, I would say. So hopefully that's
absolutely
where we're going.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's also very true. I like how you brought up authors, because it's almost the same mindset. If you're an author, whether you're going into academic publishing or just commercial fiction, there are gatekeepers.
Oh, yeah.
And these are gatekeepers who are in like these big houses or part of these fellowships or societies that are not willing to uh, allow new ideas. And especially if you look at from the author's point of view, if you're trying to get into the big publishing houses, it's very, very detrimental and could turn someone away.
Yeah.
And that allow, of course, the independent route to become more promising.
Right.
But I definitely feel for, authors and as historians to also look at the grounded levels, whether it's like uh, reenactment groups, festivals. I know, especially in the UK, some of my fellow historians and authors have been a part of like the Chalk History Festival, which is, just incredible.
Yeah.
And this also kind of brings up another thing, which I want to hear your thoughts on, Keith, which is balance. And what I mean by that, I'm going to give an author example. So last year, I had a guest on the show, Eric Bowden, and
Mhm.
I asked him this question, which was, who are the authors who really inspired you to help create your voice as an author? And he said all the authors that he admired, but he added a twist to it. And I've used that for episodes after that, and which was
Mhm.
this. I could tell you all the authors who have helped me, but at the end of the day, it's my work that people are going to be reading. I'm
Right.
not trying to be this. I'm not trying to be that. I'm trying to be me.
Right.
And that's the same mindset for historians because we're taught so many different disciplines from various historians of the past and present. And
Yeah.
when we, write our work, whether if we're writers or even if we're teachers and we're presenting a curriculum that is either based on one that we remember growing up that was very, very promising, or a mesh of things. At the end of the day, it's our own work that we're showing. It's our voice, because that is what's going to grab our readers or our students' attention. So for you, Keith, how have you been able to balance these two, your individuality as a historian, as a person, but also showcasing the discipline side that, hey, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing. However, I am open to discussion to have someone kind of keep me in check, so to speak.
So sorry, I'm just writing a few notes down with that. So it's excellent, and I want to say, going through grad school, I've had names like Eric Foner, we've had David McCullough, these people who are titans in the industry, and
Right.
so and so you ask sort of what have I done to balance? What have I done to balance? And so I think it's sort of cliche saying I stay true to myself. I will be that sarcastic, that funny, try to put when I can a sort of humorous take on history that I may have lived. If you don't mind, I'll bring up a very short story. I remember being in ninth grade when 9/11 happened in New Jersey. And so the day is like a blur because I could leave the school and we could see smoke from 35 miles away. And so when I'm having discussion with students, seeing 9/11 in the textbook now, I can say, you can read everything here, which is cut and paste. Excuse me, it's cut and dry. It's beautifully worded. There's a textbook author that did this. But let me tell you my experience. And so I could tell them, I remember where I was, what I did, how I saw my family when I got home. And I think having that sort of spin, especially this day and age, we have the technology to, I got to go tweet about that, or I have to go, throw this on Instagram. You're able to find these connections with everybody else. And so that's what's so weird to me is through the writings of Foner, the writings of McCullough, the writings of Snow, our writings now could be 140 characters. Our writings could be on Instagram and we could archive these things. So for me, that's how I could sort of keep my balance. Is I could do this reading, but I could share out. I could share on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm, considering applying abroad. Have you guys ever thought of anything? So there's sort of this back and forth narrative with history now that maybe we didn't get to experience 20, 30 years ago. And so I think that's what keeps my balance and my ability to say, this is part of me, this is where I'm from, but this is where I got my sort of my intro to the field as well.
Absolutely, and that kind of leads up to one of the heavy hitter questions, which I'm gonna lay down some context for this one because it is a big one,
Okay.
and that is this. So when I started this now going 6 years, it was now 2 years just audio, and now 4 years video. Well, actually, take that back. Switch it. 4 years audio now, 2 years video.
hmm
I did not think I would ever be doing this, but ultimately, here I am. And I've
Yeah.
had the opportunity to meet a wide range of people who have offered me so many incredible pieces of information. And the one thing that I absolutely love is this: no matter what your first thing is, it's not going to guarantee your success, whether
hmm
that is in the author world or the historian world.
Yeah.
And that is a very tough pill to swallow, but it is true.
Yeah.
And for that, I've looked at it that there's two pathways for historians with that mindset. And that is to be an historian and to be known as an historian. One is dedicated to the scholarship, the other is dedicated to marketing and building their brand. Now, both sides have their own hurdles,
Yeah.
but definitely for first time historians, and by that I mean people who are just getting out of university, going into the workforce, the second pathway is the most enticing because that's the end goal.
Yeah.
But ultimately, as we said before, it's not a get rich quick money scheme because
Yeah.
there is no guarantee. But I do want to say there are exceptions to that rule. Of course, you have students whose first thesis or dissertation lands them that opportunity, and all the
Yeah.
power to them. That is not an easy thing to do. But generally speaking, you have this roller coaster of highs and lows in the field of history. And going back again to what we talked about, how we are taught that history or historians have two paths, whether it's the federal level, working for the federal government, or going down the academic side. And you have this third path in the middle, the independent historian. So ultimately, Keith, here's my question to you. What are your thoughts on this discussion that in the field of history, there is no guarantee that your first anything is going to guarantee you the stardom or the legacy that you are expecting, but it should not stop you from
Yeah.
pursuing history if that is something you're truly passionate about?
My thoughts on that. One word came to mind, and that was fair. That was fair. I say that because I know people that have put in when I was in grad school. I had a cohort, someone in my cohort who wrote one of the most beautiful pieces of literature I think I've ever read before, and they loved it and they ran with it. They put it in a conference, and it was just phenomenal. And I say, you know what? You worked hard. You put that time and effort in. It should turn into a PhD. It should turn into a
Mhm.
where there are students also in that same cohort who were willing to say, you know what, I just want the degree. I want it in hand and I want to get to work and I want to, make it on my own. And that's also fair too. You put in what you put in and you get what you get.
Right.
So fair comes to mind, but also I do think and I hate saying this because I'm not a gambling person, but sometimes there's luck. It's that cliche, right place, right time. If you have a script or something, you hand it off to the right person who knows somebody, it's your time. But it's just hoping you make the most of it, whether it's luck or whether it's fair. I think in history, it's sort of, uh, I'm sort of fumbling because there's something where if you choose to go, sorry, I'm sort of backpedaling because you talked about that third pathway of independent.
Right.
I also think that's fair and luck too. I mean, each way you sort of look, whether it's academia, maybe you'll be a professor, you might not be. You'll end up in teaching and coaching a football team, which is it seems where I might end up. And if you
Mhm.
end up in the federal government, that's phenomenal too. I mean, there's going to be something you're doing there. But if you want to choose that independent path as well, you might not have anyone in your corner telling you what to do or in your ear explaining something. So there, you're off
Mhm.
running on your own. And so those two words, that sort of that fairness and that luck, are immediately what come to mind. I think that's what makes it the best field, though. I think that's what makes it the best humanity. There's no math cut and dry answer. There's no science. We have a theory here. Everything seems to be open for interpretation.
Absolutely. And also within that, I definitely feel that as historians and also as authors, to grow and, build who we are, it definitely takes a lot of connections, especially in the historian community, meeting new people, understanding, hey, can you help me with this? Or can you show me how you did this? Or just making connections in general. Case in point, when I first joined LinkedIn, I knew nobody. The first person who I met was, of course, Michael Stroud, who has been on this show now twice, and I've learned so much from him, and that opened the door for a snowball effect of new people and new opportunities. One of which, of course, was going out of my comfort zone and writing articles for independent magazines. And I absolutely love that. And going back to this discussion of, not getting exactly what we want at like the right place or right time, that is fine. Because just as authors, historians grow with our research. It may be our 10th project, 15th project, 20th project that really gets our name out there. Because when that happens, look at this. You now have new followers. You have people interested in your research. You've honed your skills and possibly picked up new ones along the way. So that way you can say, hey, if you like this research, you should check out my journey. You should check out what I've been working on to get up to this point. And that is completely fine. Now, of course, that's one mindset. If you want to be that person that really wants to make money of being an historian, that is a lot of hustling. That is a lot of trial and error. So it's, again, two different mindsets or various mindsets that work for whichever individual. And going back to this topic of connections, for you, Keith, when you got onto social media in case for LinkedIn, who were the fellow historians and individuals who have helped you understand the field and the industry / business side a little bit better?
Oh my goodness. You mentioned Michael Stroud for sure. Been incredible. Yourself, seeing you put out, I hate to sort of go in and take a dig at historians, but like for the longest time, I was like, nobody ever wanted to interview them. They're the sort of boring, left behind History Channel people. Then we become friends, we connect, and I'm like, oh my God, he's actually interviewing historians. Like, this is incredible. So yourself, Michael, oh my God. Jessica Waters has helped me so much. I get Courtney Atkins from Military.
Yes, Courtney.
Like, there are just so many people. I mean, I could go for days. I don't want to. Yourself, Michael, Jessica, so many more, and I'll give them a shout out. I swear, down the road.
Yeah, you listed some the great people, Courtney as well, who's been on the show. Actually, he's only been on the show now on YouTube once. My plan is to get him back on again. But yeah, I have to agree. As historians, we learn from each other, we build each other, and also there tends to be this discussion, almost like in the author world, that especially indie authors, it's a cutthroat industry where we're trying to get our name out there and sabotage the other. That is not true, generally speaking. That's the same thing for historians. We're not trying to dismantle anyone's research. Now, will we comment and give our critiques to a research? Absolutely. But we do that out of respect to the individual because we believe this person is incredible. They just need to help fine-tune their research, their writing, to get it where it needs to be. And that is completely fine. So besides those people that you mentioned, Keith, are there any family and friends you would want to give a shout out to who have helped you along the way on this journey of yours up to this point?
Definitely. My wife, obviously, first, Lisa Pakela, I'm very lucky. She's a lawyer, so she will go over all my writings. She will rip it apart. She'll be like, this makes no sense grammatically. Go back and fix that. She's incredible. My best friend, Kevin Spidell, he's living up in New York. He's trying to become a graphic artist as well. He's talking to me about like short stories, things like that. Absolutely amazing. And they don't have any sort of social media, but my parents, for just like trusting in me and letting me run with this crazy idea.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that is really amazing, Keith. And we're now nearing the end of this amazing historians interview. So here is the final question. Everything you've learned so far on this journey of yours, from the trials, the hurdles, the setbacks, everything, what is your word of wisdom to fellow and future historians watching or listening to this interview right now?
So I've been very lucky to learn from many great professors, many friends, and I had someone tell me one time that there's always something else that's waiting to be studied. Just because someone might have beat you to your idea first doesn't mean you can't, go a little bit deeper or even just take a different path that they sort of coincide. So just keep looking, keep reading, keep exploring, and you'll find what you're really looking for.
Absolutely 100%. And a perfect ending to our very first historians interview of 2025. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening or morning, wherever you are in the world. A huge thank you to Keith for coming out today. Keith, before we end, where can people find you on social media? And do you have any projects that are coming out this year? Any articles that you've written for any magazines that people should be on the lookout for?
Thank you for the chance to talk about that, sort of give myself a little plug. First of all, I mainly use LinkedIn, so just my name, Keith Pakela. I do have an Instagram. It's its_Keith24, my lucky number. Facebook, I'm not really on, but if you ever find me. As far as projects coming up, I'm doing some writing for, I think also on LinkedIn, is it Jackson Van Uden? I forget his name.
Yeah, Jackson Van Uden. Yes.
Yes, Jackson. I'm doing an article or two for him. One coming out about the pirate trial of the century, talking about William Kidd. So that's to look forward to, and then sort of just keeping eyes and ears open, willing to sort of collaborate and see where we go in the new year.
Awesome. I will link all that down below in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another amazing episode. And I am so excited to share with you all the many other guests coming out, not just this week, but the weeks coming after. Again, a huge thank you to Keith for coming on the show. It's been a long time coming, and I'm so thankful that we have had him here. And as always, viewers and listeners, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below. And if you're a follower of my newsletter, make sure to subscribe to that. And as always, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world.
Thank you.